you sit there, you're the one who has to start everything. Take one and pass it around. Now, there's not going to be a quiz on this. This is just for your information. When we start talking about learning and being able to learn, we need to know what is appropriate for certain age limits, spans, so that you would not expect an early childhood or an infant or an early childhood to be able to prepare for marriage and life together, right? So, and you would not expect that those who are preparing for marriage and living together in a family to be adjusting to difficulty and physical strength. It's just a way of, this is called a taxonomy, and this is from education, not just Christian education. This is from, Heavenhurst is an educator that's known around the world. And this is just a brief taxonomy. If you want more, just look up on the Google, because you can Google anything. And you can find considerably more information about where people are learning at different stages and what they're doing physically as well as mentally and spiritually and emotionally at different stages. So that's just for your information. The next one, this is a set. That's a set, pass it on. Set, pass it on.
Don't take, no, the whole thing.
Pass it on. This is a set.
No, take it off, take it off.
Take it all, pass it,
That's the whole
Jerry,
thing.
pass the whole thing on.
One per person.
Pass it on, Jerry. Thank you. I don't know how to do this any quicker. We had to teach the session how to do that. Okay, you only need one set per person. One set per person.
This is yours.
Hard to get a hold of.
Well, there's a set.
Thank you.
How many more sets do I need? Okay. Okay, one.
That's yours.
That one's for Alicia. And that's for Martha. This is for Jerry. Jan and Ed. Thank you. These are important. These are also going to be pieces that you will use later. I want to go over these briefly. Want to look at the 4 kinds of questions. Now there's front and back. So, I like you. I like you a lot.
He's good.
You're left-handed. We're the only ones in our right mind.
Here's another one. There's another one.
That's a high percentage.
Good. 9% of us are left-handed.
You say you like me, wait until you see my handwriting.
No, my mama taught me to write properly. I don't have to read your handwriting, so. If you will look at the, now I have pretty colors, but I didn't have colored paper this morning, so, oh well. If you will look at these 4 kinds of questions, you know this stuff. You know that there are different kinds of questions. The first one is factual information. If I want to get information about the story, I will say to the children, what was Noah's sons' names? And they will say to me, you don't know. Noah had 3 sons. Their names were Japheth. Ham, Shem, and Japheth. Good for you. What you get with factual questions, and the characteristics of factual questions is that you get information from a story or from an event. That's the characteristics of factual questions. The strength is that you get the information that you're looking for. And if you're teaching children, that's what you want. You want them to have the factual information first. Sometimes if you're teaching adults, you want them to have the factual information first. What's Noah's wife's name? It is not Joan of Arc.
Mrs. Noah.
It is Mrs. Noah.
We never know.
She didn't have a name. That's right. They didn't call the women by name, which is a different kind of question. Then the strengths of it is that you get factual information. The weakness is that it's only factual information. There's not any evaluation. There's not any way of taking it into your own life and making it yours. It's just simply factual information. The second kind of question is the analytical question, which asks you to look at a body of information and draw draw some conclusions about it. For instance, why did it rain for 40 days and 40 nights? We just did Noah camp. That's why I'm at Noah, by the way. Why did it rain for 40 days and 40 nights?
Because God said so.
Wrong. What?
God made it rain.
No.
Back and read this chapter again.
40.
The water.
40 is the number of completion in the Bible.
Okay.
So 40 stands for the number of completion. So it rained until it got done raining. Okay? So they were in the wilderness for 40 days. They were in the wilderness till everybody died of that generation, except Joshua. Okay? Jesus was in the wilderness for 40 days, tempted by Satan. He was there until he got done. That's the number of completion. Is 40. So that's an analytical question. Okay? Questions? So you're beginning, in an analytical question, you're beginning to make some differentiation between why. Why did this happen rather than that happen? So why were they on the boat then 120 days?
That's the trial.
It's 3 cycles of 40.
Yeah.
3 cycles of 40. Yay! Gotcha! Good. Good. It is 3 cycles of 40.
40 days of rain.
Just took a long time for all that rain to go away.
40 days to float around.
I'm sorry?
40 days of rain, 40 days to float around, and 40 days for it to dry up.
Well, they were on the boat actually 120 days after the rain. But 3 is an important number in the Bible as well. Even though the word Trinity is never mentioned in the Bible, there are lots of 3s in the Bible. That's the Godhead. So 3 times 40 is talking about the power of the Godhead. But you didn't know all that, did you, before you came? Y'all are good. The strength of an analytical question is it begins to ask you to make some conclusions. The weaknesses is that it's basic conclusions and not anything that you'll go into your life and make it different. And it's still basically, analytical questions are still basically informational. So the characteristics of analytical questions is that it's basically, analytical is basically still informational. but it's asking you to begin making some questions and analysis of it. The productive questions are open-ended. I did not do this. This worksheet is about 150 years old. So, you know, the productive questions are open-ended. And so you are beginning as the hearer of the story, you are the beginning to make some conclusions, some evaluation on your own. I wonder how Mrs. Noah felt on that ark. That's an open-ended question, and you're beginning to produce some information on your own. Because it doesn't say in the Bible how Mrs. Noah felt. But we probably could make some conclusions.
Oh, yeah.
If it wasn't for the rain outside, you couldn't stand the smell inside. That, you know, those are productive questions. And it's beginning to ask you to produce on your own, not directly out of the story. And some of the strengths are that it's asking you to step into the story and become part of the story. And then the weakness is that it's at a very basic level of doing that. But with children and actually with all ages, and they don't have these down here, but that I wonder question is very, very good question to use all the time. I wonder how they got out of that boat. I wonder how the bird knew to fly back to that boat. I mean, you know, we're talking about a lot of water in one little boat. How'd that bird know to go back where it was? I wonder how all the trees started growing when they were all covered with water. But those are really good questions to use. The last kind of question is an evaluative question, and this is the top of the line, asking you to say, how do I get into the story, and what does it mean to me? Are there ways that our society in what ways are our society like Noah's? That's an evaluative question.
In an awful lot of ways.
Let me count the ways. So, but it's asking the characteristic of an evaluative question. Ask you to get into the story and make some conclusions for your own lives. Any questions for me? You're going to use these in just a few minutes, so don't get rid of these and don't put them away. Any questions for me? Anything you don't understand about these kinds of questions? These are questions you've been using all your life. You just didn't know that you were calling them that. Now, the cone of experience. I want to tell you about that the least effective way of teaching is a lecture. And you see that it goes down and it goes up. And you see that for those who are lecturing, 10% recall. Hence why you don't remember the sermon the next week. But if we say it long enough and loud enough, So presentation with handouts is 20% recall. Then we move on down, which what we're going to do in just a few minutes is this practice under supervision. So now that's just for your information. What I want you to really look at are these, because this is going to be so important for you shortly. Mine are green, yours are not. These are different ways, these are lists of different kinds of activities that you can use as learning activities. So if I had put up a piece of paper on the board, on the wall, and said to you, when you come in, I want you to just write down a question that you have about Christian education. That would have been a graffiti writing. That's what that's called. If I say to you, we're going to get up and we're going to listen to music, and I want you to move to the music, that's down there, activities for celebrating life and faith. You see all of those, and then over on the next page is a different way of looking at them as well. You know, if you have a questionnaire, that's cognitive. If you have a questionnaire that asks you to change your behavior, that's behavioral. Then the next page, I'm just going to run through these because I don't want to waste much time on them. Is methods for use in Christian education. You see all of those. You will use all of those later in just a few minutes. Coloring, figurines, making puppets, working out a play with a puppet, a movie production, looking at videotapes or movies. You can tell how old these are. It says overhead projection. So you can add others to those because these are old. Plays, skits, hymn writing or hymn reading. And then over here on the last page is some of these major ways that are appropriate for each age level, which goes back to our taxonomy. All right. That should be the end of your stack. Now I'm going to shut up and let you ask what kind of questions you want to ask so that we can all be on the same page. I've run through a lot of information very quickly. Comments, questions? Wish you weren't here. Too much information? This is going to be a long day if you don't talk to me.
Yeah.
What do you want, questions? Our questions?
I want your questions.
I'm questioning miracles.
Okay. And exactly what does that mean?
Virgin birth.
Okay, I understand the miracles that you're talking about. In what ways are you questioning them?
Are they real? Or are we, or, geez, I sound like an atheist or something. I don't want to come off that way. Are they real? It's hard for me in my scientific mind to get through my head that you die and you come back to life, or a virgin birth.
Do you know that you can be a Christian and not believe in the virgin birth?
I hope so.
The only thing that you must believe is that Jesus was resurrected, and to be a
You
Christian.
see, that's another one of the miracles. I have a question about it. What keeps me coming to church every day is my faith. I have faith in it, but I still have questions. I believe, help me with my unbelief.
For most with the exception of the resurrection, for most of the miracles, the question is, would it matter? Does it matter?
It does to me because I want there to be a life after this. So it does
That's the
matter.
resurrection,
Yeah.
but that has nothing to do with any other kind of miracles.
No, well, I just threw miracles out there because then I question this miracle and then it
You
goes on and
know,
on and on.
okay, we're at a party in Cana, and run out of wine, and Jesus says, fill up the buckets with the jars with water, and suddenly it becomes some of the best wine in the party. Does it matter?
Yes. To me it does because if
No.
that's the truth, then
It doesn't matter. They
really-
were already drunk anyway, so what difference
Yeah,
did they
well, yeah,
make,
yeah,
whether
it
they
doesn't
were
matter.
drinking water or wine?
Yeah. I like Yingling.
Well, I mean, the reality is, except for the resurrection, it doesn't really matter,
Yeah, that's I agree.
you know? Because it doesn't really affect us, except in our faith.
Yeah.
Now, you know, we need to talk about the resurrection as different, because that's God being God. That's not a water to wine kind of thing, or a shoes not wearing out in the 40 years. That's kind of, you know, what difference does it make to me whether their shoes wore out or not? It's not my feet that I'm walking on, that they're walking on.
If the resurrection is real, then the rest of this stuff doesn't matter.
You're exactly right. If the resurrection is real, the rest of the stuff is just
That's right.
gravy.
Wasn't that one, wasn't that one of Jesus' teaching methods?
Yes, it was. It's
Okay,
an
he
educational
used that as
method.
an example
It's
of
an
what else he was
educational
taught,
method.
and so they could actually, see what was happening.
It was an educational method. It was a way of engaging people. It was. But when we read it, when we read the Bible, what we are looking for is how it applies to us. That's called exegesis. And so the fact that Jesus turned water into wine at a party several thousand years ago in Cana really isn't all that important. What is important is that I believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God, who then was able to turn the water into wine at a party 1,000 years ago in Cana. Right?
Yep.
Do you believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God? God of God, very God of very God. Not of the same substance, but same instance of God. Born out of the flesh of God. If you believe that, and you believe that because he is the Son of God, because he is very God of very God, that comes out of the Nicene Creed. Spends about this much of the Nicene Creed saying he is the God of God, very God of very God, begotten and not made. All of those things. If you believe that, and because he is the God of God, the very God of very God, that he was resurrected. Do you hear that? He did not resurrect himself. He was resurrected. then that is confirmation that he is God of God, very God of very God, begotten and not made, same substance as the Father. That's the only one that matters, because that's what covers us. That's the only one that matters. You know, does it matter that it rained 40 days and 40 nights? Hardly. I wasn't on that ship. No. Does it matter that when the woman was brought to Jesus that was taken in adultery, that the man didn't show up either? No. That Jesus forgave her is what you need. So if he can forgive her, he can forgive me. We're looking at the Bible as descriptive.
Can he forgive me for doubting?
Oh, most certainly. He actually, there's an old book, Doubting Your Doubts. It's old, and one of the best educational tools we have is doubt, because it makes us ask questions. Yeah.
Gets us to the evaluative question, right?
It gets us right straight to the evaluative question. It just bypasses all the other stuff because it's not important. It gets us right straight to that evaluative question. What does it mean in my life? Precisely. Thank you. I don't know that I've convinced you. I'm not trying to convince you. I'm simply saying this is how I look at it. And I have a scientific mind. I get it.
I feel by thinking this way, I'm very selfish because I'm not really thinking about God. I'm thinking about, I want a life on the other side for me. You know, that's a better way to.
That's okay. God understands that. That's all right. All right. Questions about this stuff I handed out to you? Okay, do you think you'll be able to use it when I ask you to? Oh, good. We're going to go this way this time. Just take it and pass it. No, not the whole thing. The whole thing. We cannot do this as a session because it always gets screwed up somewhere. All right about in there.
Everybody wants to see what's done.
It's like they're passing the bucket in the firewood.
Do you have one? Okay. How many more? Four. Three. That's it? Did you get Susan? All right. Now here is where we're going to get down to the meat and the potatoes of the whole day. Learning styles. You notice that all of this information that I gave you before was about how to learn, how people are learning, how they are, where they are developmentally, how to ask questions, and then this cone of experience. All of that. This is for you. So write your little name on the top of it. In the upper right-hand corner. You're not going to give this back to me. These are all just for you. So what I want you to do is circle the number of each activity that you really enjoy and how you learn well and effectively. Just go down through there and whack down the numbers. Circle the numbers. And you can't like them all.
Trust me, I'm not looking at all of them. I just did one.
Do you know what simulations are? Where you pretend that you're somebody
The
else?
activity.
quicker you do this, the better it's going to turn out, because you don't need to sit and debate about them. You just go, yes, no, I don't want to do that. Unless somebody twisted my arm, I wouldn't do that. Okay, once you have those done, those circled, just repeat it down here in your circles, in your line below. Okay, add up your numbers at the bottom.
Do you have a calculator handy?
I do. I got 10 of them. Right here. What'd you turn out? What's your highest one?
C,
That doesn't surprise me.
yeah, doesn't surprise me.
Where'd you turn out?
1.
Oh, that's an I.
Aye.
Okay. It's okay. It looks the same. That's just the font that I used.
I'll make it.
Susan, where'd you turn out?
D.
Nah, that doesn't surprise me. Martha?
D for me also.
Okay. That's pretty much right on. Ken?
Tied A and I.
You got an I and an A tied?
And the
I
A-
can see that.
The A for me is only one behind
Yeah, I can see that. Bill?
A for analytical.
I had no C.
You had no C's?
None, sorry.
Well, if you look at the back page, that tells you what those are. The back page says, an I is an imaginative learner. The emphasis on group activities to explore many ideas through a variety of means. An analytical learner is emphasis on facts, logical soundness of ideas. You want information. Common sense is on practical and relevant, that should be to life uses for ideas and theories. And D is a dynamic learner, emphasis on hands-on trial and error, results oriented from various options. Are you surprised at what you turned out? Or does it pretty much describe you? How'd you turn out?
D.
Does that surprise you?
No, I guess not.
Okay. What about you, sir?
D.
Jerry, where'd you turn out? You didn't?
No,
You didn't play with us?
You didn't do it, or you didn't turn out anywhere?
I didn't turn anything out because I have to, it takes some studies to look at these different,
Oh, no, I don't want you to study it. That's the point.
well, you're gonna get 0 then.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. Okay, everybody who is an innovative learner, I want you to stand up. Who's an I, whose largest group was I. I want you to take your little stuff and go over to another table all by yourselves. I'll tell you what to do once you get to
See what?
those who are A's. Any A's in here? You? All right, you're by yourself. C? Common sense? That you? Well, you're gonna be by yourself too. That means I'm assuming the rest of you are D's. D? D? D, D, D? Okay, you go over there at a table. He needs needs water or coffee cake or any of that, now's the time.
Bill, how's your coffee?
Don't pray for patience, God
Well,
doesn't give
it's
it to you.
tea
He
and it's
teaches it.
empty.
You need some more?
No, I'm good.
There's
Because I
that.
know you drink coffee, I'm gonna keep you loaded.
None, well, yeah, no. I'm fine.
I'm gonna keep you loaded.
Oh my, we're having all sorts of things going on and they'll never let me teach again. Okay,
How's your coffee? You want more coffee?
No, I'm fine, thank you.
you were
I'm
cheats.
getting jittery. This is more coffee than I've had in a month.
I think if, you'll find that it's 90% decaf.
It tasted a little unleaded to me.
That's a little unleaded. There's a little bit.
Maybe it's a placebo effect experience.
There you go. All right. The first question I have is, how did you like the exercise?
We
Was
did.
that interesting?
Yes.
Did you learn anything?
Yeah.
I seem to learn a lot about the group over there.
That group over there has, they're a little strange.
No, we just signed off on the right checks. You know, put a bunch of heads together and it was fun.
She called us strange.
And I'm proud of it.
Different, dynamic, how's that?
That's it.
Said a little strange.
Strange works.
Okay, imaginative learners, what did you do? What are your activities? First of all, what groups did you choose?
Children you're gonna space on in children's sermons on Sunday morning.
Okay,
And then a teenage group.
teenage group, okay. Tell us what you did for the children.
For the children, we decided on a storytelling with props
Okay,
on Noah. So the first part, which was his genius idea, was an aquarium with weevils for the
And a
ship and
boat.
the animals in the boat
ah, cool.
and the floating. And then what we decided as they floated into the land was turn it into then it would hit land and turn into a Velcro board with props. So
Cool.
they would turn into dimensional characters with the animals and the people and how they,
Out of the boat on
Onto
the
the dry land.
green dry land.
yes, with the trees growing from the water.
Way cool. I like that idea.
Yeah,
That's
we
good.
liked it too.
That's a great idea. Okay, what else are you gonna do?
That's basically where we spent a lot of our time, was figuring out how to do
How to tell the
water
story.
part and then turn it
Yes.
into dry land.
Right, and what I was telling Ed is that at my church, because I write the curriculum for my church, we always spend at least a couple of weeks on each story.
That's what.
One is to
yeah,
tell
that's
the
what Ken said.
story, because especially with children, you've got to get the story into them. Well, what you have done is you have expanded, they've heard the story, they've seen the story, they've handled the story. The only other thing you could do is to smell it and taste it.
We can make it smell it, because I can bring that from the farm.
Okay? All right, good. Fish sticks.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, great. All right, what else did you, what's the other one?
Teenagers.
Okay.
And again, we went to a role playing, we're gonna go to a role playing.
Okay.
And so this is multi-week
Okay.
activity, so we're gonna have some background first, and then we're gonna have the kids be characters. Noah, Mrs. Noah, animals.
Okay,
And work with the kids and help assign those based on personality and so on. Then they're gonna go home and they're gonna do a little research on your character and how they are on the boat, and then maybe how that's gonna fit into our lives today.
yeah, a community.
Mhm.
How does that fit into the
How did
community?
the bear get along with the dove on the boat? And how's the bear gonna get along with the dove? in
Once they're
today's
free.
Once they're free and in today's society.
Cool.
So those
Cool.
are,
Now, let me add something. When you have them act out the story,
yeah, we're gonna have a play. We do have a skit
right,
play.
a play,
Yeah.
tape it.
Okay.
videotape it and show it to the adults. All right?
Mhm.
Because they will pay more attention to the story because those are their
Their
kids
kids telling it.
telling it.
Oh, that's awesome.
I can even,
That becomes your sermon on Sunday, you have to do
There
it.
you I can set, I have a church that has basically older people and not, well, that's not actually true. We have 18 to 20 kids,
I was
but
gonna say, you have some kids.
we
in
have
church.
lots of little kids.
I've been there.
And lots of young people. But the older people do not like it when we set up a video things. They want a traditional worship. So to set up to have TV up there and show, it's not gonna work at my house. But I could put their kids on it and they're glued to it. So it's a
That's a
way
good
to
idea.
introduce that to adults.
Yep.
Thank you, both great ideas. Both great ideas. All right, common sense person, let's see what you did.
I did children and teenagers.
Okay.
And for children, I did something very similar in storytelling, using puppets.
Puppets are great for
Um,
common sense kind of stuff.
Draw the ark and the animals. And for teenagers, I contemplated a trip to the modern recreation of the ark. I'm missing the name of
It's in Kentucky somewhere.
What's it gonna take? It's a 3-day trip.
that. But also to have them help teach the children.
Good idea. Good idea. Great. All right, analytical learner over there, what'd you do?
I did the children and the teens as well.
Okay.
For the children, I talked about just reading a story, not from the Bible, but a story of Noah, showing pictures of the ark and animals, singing a song about Noah.
The
ark-
Lord told Noah to build him an arky.
Yeah.
Yes.
Also, play with animals, not just cats and dogs, but like
Real,
other
like
animals that
different kinds of
they
animals.
would think outside the box.
Hedgehogs,
Yeah.
tarantulas.
Build an ark with popsicle sticks or something.
Yeah, yeah.
And then for the teens, read the scripture, and then potentially put on a play, relate how being on some kind of a ship is to being on the ark. Maybe they have experience on cruise ships or something, or their parents have been on.
Or even a
ships.
boat out in a lake.
Right. Study the maps and land masses versus water coverage.
That's very analytical. That's great. Those are great. But do you see why it matters that how you approach it as to how you're going to teach the class, the other people that you're teaching, and how it's important to have all of us together teaching because we're going to take on different parts. All right, this group that we learned so much about, dynamic learners.
You have
Let's
it written
go.
all- You have all the notes.
Well, basically, we were looking at children,
Okay.
and because of I do weird things at our church, this can also turn over into an adult setting. First of all, we're gonna tell them a story. We're gonna teach them a story
Okay.
and give them a time to
How are
ask.
you going to teach that story?
We're going to read the biblical.
Okay, you're going to read the biblical
We're going to
story.
read the biblical story. Then we're going to give them an opportunity to ask their questions about,
Okay.
how did this happen and how did that, and who was on and so forth.
And what are you going to and how are you going to answer them when you?
We're going to be able to answer them by scripture.
Good luck with that.
We can do it.
I bet you can't.
I got a question for you then. How did they get rid of manure on the boat?
Out the window.
Scripturally.
Scripturally. That's
Out the
not
window.
scripture. That's not scriptural.
That's not scriptural, but no, that's reality. Out the window.
Well, but that's not scriptural. You said you were going to be able to answer the question scripturally.
the questions that we're anticipating that they're gonna ask us.
That's the first
That's the first question you're
That's my
gonna get
first
from some
question.
little kid.
Okay, then we're gonna answer it as truthfully and honestly as we can, out the
And
window.
let me tell you,
That's exactly
let me
right.
tell you what you need to know. Sometimes the only answer you have is, I don't know. And that's perfectly fine answer. I don't know.
Then we're gonna turn it into, they're using their imagination for them to draw. And they can draw, they can create a picture of what they see as the ark, and the people, and the animals, and all of that kind of stuff. And once we get all that done,
That's with Play-Doh or popsicle sticks or drawing.
Right,
or
right, got it,
a
got it.
variety
She
of
suggests
options.
drawing or some way, and
Yeah.
hands-on. Some
Yeah, it would be
hands-on
hands-on.
way.
and then we decided that we should reenact, let them reenact the whole, do a play, a
Okay.
skit kind of thing.
All right.
And let them build an ark and,
Here's some trial and error that you
we'll
could
always
try.
have that.
Have them build an ark and see if it'll float.
Oh, yeah.
Actually, that was one of the notes I had for the teenagers. When I was in the Boy Scouts, we used to make boats using paper, and you'd cover them and draw crayon all over them, because the wax would make them watertight, and then see which ones would float and have
Good
legs.
idea.
Or
Great idea.
cardboard and duct tape.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then you get to talk about pitch,
Yeah.
because God had them covered all in pitch.
Mm-hmm.
All right, these are great ideas.
She didn't name our boat,
Oh,
our
I
ark.
forgot, we did.
HMS what?
No, the Love Boat, God's
God's
Love
love
Boat.
boat.
The animals, they went on, but Tuesdays, animals, they went on, but Tuesdays, elephants and kangaroosies, children of the Lord. The animals, they came off by threesies. Animals, they came off by threesies. Elephants and
That's why all animals
chimpanzees.
have different reproduction cycles. Some of them were used for food along the way.
Yes, they were.
A rabbit in 21
That's what you
days
say.
versus a cow in 9 months.
Yes, or an elephant at 2 years. Yep. You know how to eat an elephant?
One bite at a time.
One bite at a time. All right.
That's a lot of friends.
That's a lot of friends. Well, there is that. There is that story about having a party, and you cut up the elephant, and if you have too many, you add a rabbit. Too many people, you just add a rabbit. Okay. What have you learned about the exercise that we have done? This exercise and hearing the responses. What have you learned from that?
Well, I know when our Christian Ed Committee is creating something, how much of a bonding experience it is for us. Just being creative together.
It is. It is. It's a wonderful bonding experience. It is. Yep.
In this particular instance, I'm looking and I'm thinking about it. We all had the same ideas, different approaches to it.
Exactly.
But we all were doing the same thing,
Well,
but a different
and what
approach.
happens with Christian education committees, more than what happened here today, I wanted y'all in with like people, but what happens with Christian education committees is you may have a common sense learner and 2 innovative learners and a dynamic learner and maybe an analytical learner or 2 on there. And so you get that whole breadth and depth of what is possible. And so when somebody throws out an idea like we've got to tell the story. Well, what about if we start out with we start out with an aquarium and then move to dry land? Now, how are we going to do that? And then with your hands-on experience, well, we could do this and this and this. And it becomes a much deeper and much more expressive of everyone's ideas, and it is much more of a bonding experience.
And not only that, is we always have to remember who our audience is too, and their learning styles and their creative.
Right, and so.
Or lack of
So
creativity.
every week or every story, you can't do it every week because there's not enough time. But when I was saying to you all, you've done hands-on, you've done just touch, and because the first thing they're gonna do is put their hand in the water
Yeah, oh, yeah.
and try to grab those weevils. And you've done touch, and you've done hearing, and you've done seeing, and you know, I said, okay, you only have these 2 left. Well, the next week, you know, that you're gonna do it, you might ask them, here's what I did at Noah. We were gonna build an ark. We were gonna lay out an ark on the outside of our church with spray paint. First thing you need to do is, if you're gonna do this, is notify the police. They see kids with bottles of spray paint, they get a little antsy.
The neighbors didn't like that.
And so, how do you know how many cubits is 47 cubits?
Google it.
You can Google it, but you're not going to end up with anything. They're going to tell you what I'm going to tell you. A cubit is the distance between an adult man's elbow and his longest finger. So what we had to do, what we did, the older kids got 4 or 5 adults. We didn't make them only use men, we used whatever adults were there, and measured them and then averaged it. All right? Because we were there for 5 hours, we could do that, you know? And it helped them with math skills and all of those kind of things. And then we changed cubits into inches and feet. And we went out and we put a stick down and we walked out that far, and then we started back and drew a line with spray paint. So if you come to my church in September, you will see spray paint all over my parking lot. Then we had to find something that was 40 cubits high, that we could kind of give it an idea of how high it was. So that's one of the things that we did, and we could do it because we had a longer period of time that we were dealing with the kids at that period of time. Our camps last 5 hours, from 9 until 2. And so we had a little longer period of time that we could do that. But the police did come by with concerned about the spray paint and the hands of the children. Also, one of the things that you were doing, we got washing machines and refrigerator boxes from the local furniture store. We gave each one of them a side, and they could create their own animals. Painting. Create the animals that God forgot, or that God didn't create. So they turned out all sorts of fun things, like a lion's head with a snake body and 4 legs. You know, it helps with their hands-on kind of things and imagination. All right. What else? What else did you do? What else did you learn? What else did you need to think about and contemplate? Yes.
I learned that I could participate in a lot of these activities, you know, in different groups. But I narrowed myself down to just 3 things that I could teach.
Okay.
Comfortably teach. Okay, and they would be the older people then.
Okay.
Okay? But I could participate in a group discussion and look at what they were talking about, and probably either have seen it done or maybe done it in the past, so
Mhm.
I could participate that way. But for my participation, I was more in adult, older kids.
That's okay. That's okay. How would you teach this story to adults?
Same way.
Well, I lost a job for this reason, okay? They didn't call me. I interviewed for a Christian education position, and they said, one of the questions they asked me is, what do children need to know when they're moving from cradle roll or nursery to younger elementary? And here's what the kids need to know. God created the world. God created me. God loves the world. God loves me.
At age, that's what else you do now.
Right. So the next question was, then what do adults need to know? God created the world. God created me. God loves the world. God loves me. They didn't like my answer. But that's okay, I didn't want to go there anyway. It was colder than I wanted to be. But there are some ways in which we can teach older adults and not dumb it down. Because I'm afraid that what we have done, particularly in the past generation, is we have assumed that adults do not want to do the rigorous study. And that is not accurate. So we have curricula that come out as Presbytery Light or dumbed down. And instead of, if you know anything about the curriculum that came out in the 60s and 70s, it was much more rigorous, theologically, much more rigorous, analytically, innovatively, common sense-wise, and dynamic, hands-on kinds of things. So we have made an assumption as a church that people do not want to do that kind of rigorous studying, which is absolutely incorrect.
I think a lot of the curriculum is also dummied down for children today, which
Well, that's why we write it.
if you write your own. Well,
Will you
and
take that off that list, off that? That's why I
can you
write my
delete that
own.
part?
Would you delete that part, please? That's why I write my own. That and the experience.
I think that I know where I am. I like participation from the congregation. I like them to be part of the service, not just sitting there. A lot of these things, yeah, I would have my adults do through the service. There would be some way that I could incorporate this. I would do it because I think it gives them a better, I don't want to say grasp, but a better
Yeah, but
grasp
grasp, understanding,
on,
comprehension,
even though they're 93 years old, there's still
stuff they can learn.
stuff that they can learn. So I would use this.
Was
I
preaching.
like to use expert speakers as a backup. And the most important one is Jesus.
Well, an expert has been a drip of water under pressure, so you have to be careful with that.
But that's,
What makes a person an expert is that they live 100 miles away from you. That's what makes that person an expert.
but I wouldn't define it that way.
Well, I tend not to quote other people. And if I quote other people, it's purely by accident. I mean, you do a lot of reading for sermons, and you can't always remember exactly who said what, but it comes in the sermon as my own. But we were learning about Moses. Okay? Now, I have mostly little boys. I don't know how I ended up with mostly little boys, except I love little boys. I love little boys. They don't whine, They don't have any problems
Getting dirty.
getting dirty. You're not my friend anymore. Okay, anyway, regardless. So we made Moses staffs. Handed each little boy a 3-foot dowel rod and duct tape. We made a staff. Everybody had a staff. So we chose, during worship, chose the youngest little child that was there. He was Moses. Okay? The other children were the Israelites. So I got the adults standing along the edge of we have a center aisle. And I got the adults to stand along the edge of the center aisle. They were the water. Okay? And the oldest adult that was there was Pharaoh. Okay? So here we come with the story, and Moses said, "Let my people go." And Pharaoh found his son dead, and he said, "Get out of here." And so here comes all these little kids, and they come to the Red Sea, who is like this, right? And Moses goes, whap! And the Red Sea parted. And so the Red Sea parted, and Moses and his people came all the way down to the chancel. And then they turned around and watched this 93-year-old man hobble down through the Red Sea that then closed in on him. And one of the little kids said, "No, he can't drown." And he goes and gets him, brings him through. Okay. You know, there's a lot of going on in that story. But it was just the fun part of getting people involved in it, physically involved in the story. But he obviously knew the story. This child obviously knew the story. He can't drown. We also have mentors. Every one of our children has a mentor, same gender mentor that they can sit with or talk to, and the mentors go to their ball games and those kind of things. What else do you need? What else can we do with this information? Yeah, you can implement it, yeah. Do any of your churches have small children?
Do any of your churches have children?
Well, yeah, I have 18.
And
And then
none.
I have several youth as well.
We have none.
Yeah, you have children. Here's a recommendation for you. Go out into your neighborhood and see if there are children there. Walk the streets and see if there are children there. If there are children there, you have the possibility of having children in your church. Start day camps. Start a day camp. 1 year. Have a day camp. That will bring children inside your building, especially if it's free. And it's for 5 hours. That's cheaper for parents during the summer. They don't have to pay for babysitting. And you may need to make it from 8 until 4. You may be providing the babysitting in there. And that's okay. If they send the child to you to just babysit, there's nothing wrong with that. You might get your feelings hurt and all of that, and you might get some people who have a wild hair. But what's wrong with being the babysitters for the community? You still get to touch the lives of those kids with love. If you decide that that's something you want to do, I'm available to help. We do 8 each summer. We do 8 daycares each summer. Plus, I do 4 additional vacation Bible schools each summer. It can be done. Do you know how much of that comes out of our annual budget? Zero. Zip. Nada. I have a curmudgeon. If you looked up the word curmudgeon in the dictionary, his picture would be there. Children ought not be heard. They ought to be seen and not heard. They ought to sit down and be quiet. But every year, every fall, he hands me a check for its camps for the next year. This year, I'm online with a lot of people on Facebook. Some of us have been on Facebook together for 12 years, 12, 15 years. In December, one of my Facebook friends that I have never met, we've never met, private messaged me and said, send me your church's address. My husband and I have had a good year this year, and we'd like to make a donation to your camps for next year, for next summer. I said, great, thinking probably $100, maybe $200. She sent the check for $2,000. We feed them lunch. We buy all the materials they need. It can be done. One of the things I learned at the Big Tent was that you've got to step out and do things even though you don't have the money to do it. God is faithful. And if you are trying to be God's church, then the money will show up. The money is the least thing that you've got to deal with. The most is trying to be faithful to God's call to you as a body of Christ. And once you've got that under your belt, then the rest of it's just gravy. The rest of it's easy. I have places that I can apply for grants if money becomes the issue. I have grant places that I'll be glad to share with you.
Do you have places where you can apply for help?
Yes.
Physical help?
Yes. Yes.
Because we have a congregation of, our youngest is 56. And from there, it jumps to 73.
Okay.
We only have 2 in the 50s. Everybody else is...
Are they still working?
The 2 in the 50s, yes.
So maybe you want to do it in the evening.
But here, this is the thing. The older folks, the 70s, they don't have the energy or the want or the desire to come back to the church any other time except Sunday mornings.
They want to show up and be entertained.
Maybe we're going to start a second service, so. But we don't have the physical capabilities at this present time with our congregation we're working on doing trunk or treat this year.
Okay.
To get them started.
Let me ask you a question. How old do you think I am?
Probably younger than I am.
Well, no, give me an age you think I am.
I'm going to say 63.
I was at camp every day this summer. I'm 67.
I wasn't too far.
Not too far off. But it won't be long till I'm 70. And I'll be at camp then too. It's the want to and the willingness to. The only ability you need to have with God is availability. So, do you need help? Okay, not a problem. I've got people who will come and help. I've got people who will come and help. It's just a matter of, if you, hand me a pen, please. Thank you, dear.
Well, there are quite a few things that I'm floating past session right
Well, let me tell you one of the favorite camps that we have is cooking camp.
now. Oh, yes.
And we did international desserts this year. Baklava.
We have a facility for that.
And we did gaffrettes. And we did Welch Christmas cookies. And we did, no. I bet those 70-year-olds could bake a cookie.
Some of them
And I bet they could teach those kids how to bake a cookie.
do. Some of
If,
them might.
if they, but you know what? Until they're asked, you don't know. Have you asked them to come in and help kids bake cookies?
Not that specific.
You have
thing.
to be
But
that
the first-
specific.
First thing that we have to do is get background checks done.
Technically, no. Technically, no. What has happened with that is that if I am constantly there, if I am the one who is
Right,
redoing
if you were
it
there,
and leading it, the others do not have to have background checks until you've got it established and ready to go.
Right.
Right. Now, everybody in my church has a background check. If you don't have a background check, if you're not willing to do a background check, I recommend a different church. Just that simple. Because everybody's involved with their kids.
Right.
But for the first year, you technically don't have to have a background check. You have
So
to
you get
have
a program
someone.
established.
Actually, all of your officers need to have background
All
checks.
your officers need to have background checks.
Like I said, I've got several things floating in front of the session
That's book
right
of
now.
order now, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
We're working hard at this.
But don't let that be the reason that you don't do it for the first year. Once they get involved with kids, they'll be willing to do a background check. And you do have to be that specific with people who have never done anything on their own before. You have to be that specific. Will you come Monday night from 7 until 9 and help these 3 children bake cookies?
Okay.
You do have to be that specific. Okay? Because they don't know what they don't know. And they don't know that they can do that. But you don't want to give them 10. I mean, I do 10 at a time. We made donut holes, 10 kids at a time, But I wouldn't give your people 10 at a time.
No.
2.
Well,
Maybe
like I say,
3.
we're gonna start off with getting them out there doing the trunk or treat this year.
And then that lays the groundwork for next summer,
And that lays the
a groundwork for next summer,
doing some other projects.
To
But
doing-
we've gotta get our foot
camps,
out
or,
there,
or vacation Bible school, or whatever you want to call it.
yeah. But that's where
Where
we're
are you?
focusing right now, Juniata. That's what we're focusing on right now, is
Altoona.
just getting these folks,
Oh, I was trying to remember how to spell Juniata. I got it.
yeah.
Once I look at it, I know I'm right, but it's, where's that I go? Okay, I'll give you a call.
Because they haven't had children, and it's one of these cases where it's an older congregation, and years back, there's something happened in the neighborhood, that everybody in the neighborhood hates the church and its people. So we're striving, we're working very hard at taking these baby steps to get back out into the community
Yeah.
and see these kids and talk to them when they walk by and stuff like that. And our first big, big step will be trunk or treat this
Here's another way you can be
year. And
even,
hot chocolate and donuts.
you can be even more proactive before then. Have people bring in school supplies,
Okay.
okay? And if you want, you can print the name of the church on the back of the notebook. The back of the notebook, not on the front.
Right.
On the back. And once you take them into the school and they get spread around the school system and they're spread around the school, the kids will start noticing that that's your name and that, you know, and the parents will notice.
And that's next door.
And, right, right. And so that's a subliminal way of getting in that message out. That's easy enough to do. And if they don't want to go out, or they can't, or they don't want to go out and buy school supplies, then offer them the possibility of giving me money and I'll go buy them.
We do the hats and gloves and
Uh-huh.
stuff, and we have little labels now
Uh-huh,
that we can sew inside,
uh-huh,
donated by.
yeah. You just want to do it inconspicuously,
Very subtle.
very subtle, okay? Other places, well, I better keep it.
Yeah, hang on to it for a minute.
Just remember that children, I think of this, we had Chrisland Traveling Day Camp, and we have over close to 100 kids. And many of them are the community children that are not raised in the church. They're not in the best of situations at home. And to hear the adults saying there is no respect, well, no, there isn't.
There's not going
Just
to be.
accept it, that there is no respect. And they do not know the stories. They do not know what it's like to sit in church. They do not. The one thing, when we went up Thursday night to Chrisland, there was a little guy behind me, and I heard, he was restless. And the counselor said to him, "You need to be quiet, we're at worship." And he looked at her, and I still hear his voice saying, "I don't know what you mean, what's worship?" Remember that
Yeah.
with children.
You've
that-
got to start
that-
at the beginning.
Oh,
that-
yeah.
And just even the whole, you remember when you were young and you sat quietly and you did this and you did that and all those things. They have no foundation for that.
Oh, we know that.
So just be
You've
aware
got
of
to,
that.
you've got to be very specific with children as well. One of my kids who is now a teenager, grew up in a home that was Unitarian Universalist.
That's pretty quiet.
And he went to church at his other, now, his parents are members of my church now. And so we went through that whole learning experience with his mother about who this Jesus is, because Unitarian Universalists don't believe in Jesus. And so we had this whole long, it took her 2 years to become a member. Okay? And he was there as well, but he went to visit his grandparents, and they took him to church. And one of his grandmothers said to him, "How is our church like your church at home?" And he was 4 or 5, okay? And he said, "They've got a great big plus on their ceiling in their front too." He didn't know that was a cross. It would just look like a plus sign to him. The other thing they said, when he came back, I said, "Caleb, did you go to church with your grandparents?" "Uh-huh." "Okay, how's their church like yours?" And he told me about the plus too, and I said, "Oh, honey, that's a cross. And that's the cross that, oh, that's why Jesus died on." "Yes, that's it." Okay, and so then I said, "Are there other ways that we were alike and other ways that we were different?" "Well, they didn't have a preacher." "Oh, okay. What do you mean they didn't have a preacher?" "Well, some man stood up and talked a lot, but they didn't have a preacher." His only experience with preachers were female. You gotta remember that, those kind of things, that his only experience, he thought only women were preachers. His only experience with preachers was me. And he said, and that guy talked too long. Okay, all right, other comments or thoughts that you want to share?
The problem that I've been addressing lately, I recently started a new worshiping community in our church, and we've been reaching out to people who've been pushed away by other churches, but also to people who claim themselves as Christian, but really haven't built the faith, haven't
They don't have
gained
the background.
a full understanding. And so we're doing a lot of these things that feel like they should be Bible school or
And that's okay.
very basic things, but how can I make those relevant to adults without making it feel like we're doing very childish things?
Right. One way is to involve the children and the adults in intergenerational learning. Now, I have some information and I'm making notes what to send to you. Intergenerational learning is a group learning where you have a bunch of different ages together, and they're trying to accomplish a common goal, recognizing that each of them has a different role in that group. And so if you want to talk about worship and what is worship, then you talk with that group, decides what worship is. Okay, and now that we have decided that this is worship, that singing hymns or singing whatever you sing, I mean, hymns, that's a general for any kind of music. Maybe walking around is we're talking about a labyrinth or something along those lines, would be worship. So then how, as an adult, do I behave in worship? And we have a discussion about that. How do children behave in worship? How do children how are children involved in worship? And you give them a set of questions, starting with factual, and then moving into evaluative, all the way through, to help that group then become a one-cell church, if you will. I don't know how many groups you would have in your new worshiping community, but if you have 2 or 3, then you have a one-cell church here, and a one-cell church here, and a one-cell church here, and then you ask them to come together and blend their styles. That's intergenerational kinds of things, okay? My guess would be that if the children are involved in it, the adults will sit back and watch, but they're learning too. They're learning too. And if you say to the children, well, how you worship God is by singing, I don't know, the Lord made Noah, the Lord told Noah, there's going to be an arky, and you've got hand motions and everything else, you invite the adults to do it too. I have a wonderful picture of my congregation who the children were leading and singing, "Praise ye the Lord." Praise ye the Lord, hallelujah. Praise ye the Lord, hallelujah. Okay, so, we've got these bunch of Presbyterians who are the frozen chosen with their hands in the air, dancing around because the kids told them to. And that's not dumbed down, that's just using the ones who have the excitement and the joy and haven't been taught out of them yet to do that. So those are two ways. I have some information, some lesson plans for intergenerational learning that I will send to you. We're back to miracles, are we?
Yes, yeah.
I didn't convince you the last time, huh?
Yes, you did. Yeah. I think the only thing that keeps me going is faith, and that's what it's all
But that's
about.
what
is
keeps
faith.
all of us going.
Yes, yeah.
That's what keeps all of us going. There are Sunday mornings where I don't want to go.
Well, I love going to church, and I
No,
love
there's Sunday mornings I don't want to go to church, and then I remember that I'm
You
the
need-
pastor. And they'll come get me.
Yeah.
And they'll come get me.
No, I love church, and I love what all goes on in it, and everything is just every now and then, these voices in my head say,
You might want to shoot those voices.
yeah, I know.
They're not healthy.
But I guess it's faith, what
It
it
is
boils
faith.
down to.
And that's what any of us, that's all any of us are walking in. That's all any of us are walking in. How can we help you?
I'm just listening to everything, that's helpful.
I had interesting experiences. Some we were traveling, we were in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Looked up, churches online, well, church near me, Presbyterian church. Got there 15 minutes early, like I'm taught, you're supposed to be there early. Walked into church, and it had 2 pews in the back, 2 rows of pews in the back, and everything else was easy chairs, and couch, and my wife and I were, there's one other couple there, very nice, came up and greeted us, and I'm playing the bed. What's going to happen here? It's going to be interesting to see. Well, as people came in, they're like us good Presbyterians, they all had their seats where they sat, but this couple sat in these 2 easy chairs over here. This family came in and sat on the couch. This lady came up in the front, sat in a rocking chair, pulled out her knitting, and she knitted through the whole service.
But you know what?
She was there, and she was fantastic.
One, and I bet she remembers as much or more than anybody else there
That's not the
because she has, that's the way she learns, is a
Okay.
kinesthetic learner.
Okay, yeah, that's right. But I'm thinking to myself, maybe we ought to look at stuff like that once in a while as a,
Well, you've
Do
been in
something
my
different.
congregation,
Yep.
you've been in my church, we have easy chairs in the
yes, you
back.
do, you do.
Yes, we do.
I haven't sat back there yet, but
You're welcome to.
So where did you sit down?
we sat, we sat in the first row, in the pew on the front row of pews. It was actually, it wasn't a big room. We sat in the pew in the first, what would have been the first row of pews right in the corner. And basically, everybody that came in, I mean, everybody else, we were the only visitors that Sunday, that was obvious. But everybody that came in, came over, welcomed us, talked to it. I mean, every person in that church before passing the peace later on, had come up and greeted us. And that doesn't always happen other places. We need to do that.
We have a hard time getting people to go home.
You do, yes. I
10 till and 12 o'clock, okay? But they hang around afterwards, and they go home until I get tired and I'm hungry, I'm going to lunch. If y'all want to come with me, you're welcome, but I'm hungry, I'm going to lunch. Anybody else? Anything else that you want to say? I know what time it is.
That's wrong.
You're exactly right. That is incorrect. It's an hour later.
I have to tell you, the last 2 Sundays, I just taught our congregation to do sign language to the Spirit of the living God. And they absolutely are into it. They started to feel it. And last month, I taught Jesus Loves Me at the Hollidaysburg Presbyterian Home. And they want to do it again.
I can do that in Chinese.
I really like the interaction with,
I could also do it in Hebrew and Greek and a few others, but
and this is sign language.
I can do it in sign language. I can do it in Pennsylvania Sign Language. I can also do it in International Sign Language.
We just,
That's a great thing to do.
Watching
Because-
children do sign language.
Oh,
the-
yeah.
The Bible school, they did the Lord's Prayer. That is just, it brought tears to your eyes.
Yes, and if you have the children and the children do it, and then you have the children come in and teach the adults how to do it, it's just,
Yeah.
There are
I-
ways.
I used to teach hearing impaired children, and deaf children, if you will. And so I do sign, and I'm also registered interpreter for the deaf, so.
are you gonna have classes?
No, I hadn't planned on it, but I can if I need to.
I know some folks that would like to take that.
Okay, we'll put that down and see what we can do. The kids will come up, that I was signing, unconsciously was signing Amazing Grace when we were singing it. And I watched the kids start coming down toward the front of the church. I thought, what in the world is going on? They wanted to see. They couldn't see around the adults, and they wanted to see. And so we had to sing Amazing Grace, the first hymn, first thing of a verse of Amazing Grace the second time. But we don't do it 23 times.
But that's neat that they felt comfortable coming down
Honey.
and watching.
Those kids will say anything in the world to me. Anything in the world to me. And they will raise their hands during times of joys and concerns and will tell me things that their parents wish they wouldn't tell me.
I had one of those in your church. It was, I'm like, okay, we'll move, write that down and move right along.
Right? They tell me when they're going on vacation. They tell me when they broke their wrist. They tell me when they filled the commode, you know. And when they raise their hand, the adults know I'm going to call on them. So they start going under the seats. Their parents do. Yeah. My children serve as lectors. My children serve as lectors. My children serve as acolytes. My children take a offering. They also will go out and shake down the adults if I need them to. We sometimes have 2 offerings in one service. And the kids go out and shake down the adults. And the rule is, if you will not be able to go to lunch because you gave this money away, put it in your pocket. If your children or your grandchildren will not be able to go to college because you gave this money away, put it back in your pocket. Otherwise, it goes in the container. We always get a couple of $100 for whatever we're taking it up for.
We don't have many children, actually, 2 maybe.
2's better than none.
2 is better than none, and the one just graduated from high school.
Mhm.
And he takes up offering, he introduces people, and his dad's a state policeman.
Good for him.
And once in a while, his dad will be in church, whether he's off duty or whatever.
That young man ought to be preaching occasionally.
He's had some challenges in his life, but he's a good kid. And
He still ought to be preaching occasionally.
Yeah. And I'm just asking, if, say, when I get up front and I do both the service and play the organ, my hands tend to tremble. I have essential tremors in my hands. I'm starting to go where somebody does the first part of the service from the pulpit. And I'm
It's called a lector.
Yeah. Must those people, being a lector, be an elder or deacon?
My children serve as lectors. My
Because
children
there's some
serve
kids
as,
that could do this.
my children
Well,
serve
that-
as lectors. They're in the rotation during the year as lectors. I've got kids that I can ask if there's no lector show up, I've got kids, I can say, will you be the lector today? And they'll come up and they'll be the lector
Without having to look at the material.
without having to look at the previously. Now, when I know they're going to be lectors, especially the younger ones, I simplify the language.
Right.
I mean, I do. I simplify the language. It's not that I don't think they would understand it, but the problem is I don't want to embarrass them trying to pronounce it. And so I simplify the language.
You do that for me when I come to your
I do that to you all the time.
We call that pulpit assistant in our church.
Well, it's a lector.
Because
That's-
Lamar he would get the people, we have, just about every Sunday, we have a,
The liturgical term is lector.
okay.
That's the liturgical term for the person who does all the other stuff except preach. Yeah.
Now, once in a while, when the father comes, he greets people, passing the peace. This is how, I guess the best word to use is innocent I can be about some things. I patted his dad on the shoulder and put his handgun under his jacket.
Yeah.
He didn't say anything, I didn't say anything, I have not done it since.
Let me tell you, I also have essential tremors. And mine show up when I'm really tired. Mine show up more when I'm really tired. And we're not sure it's really essential tremors. It may be a response to medication I'm on. But regardless, when the people come up to serve communion,
Oh, I got that settled.
they pick up communion.
Yep.
Especially the juice trays, because I'm just afraid I'm going to drop it in the middle of the floor.
Yes, I put my hands on the trays.
Yeah.
And they pick it up.
Right.
I
And
do
they
not-
set them back down, and we have those little wooden trays that have little peggy things underneath of it that you sit.
Yeah.
We have to sit on top of each other.
We don't.
And so I will make sure that the pegs are in, and then they set them down. And that's just the way it has to be at my house. And they all know
And everyone's used to it.
yeah, they all know to pick it up, and now I break the bread. We have a
Yeah.
common loaf.
I do that.
And I break the bread, and I don't ask them to cut it first. Anybody can break bread.
His body was broken, not neatly cut.
Well, that's true.
I don't like it cut either.
I don't have it cut. And we take from a common loaf. And then we have the individual cups, but only because we use grape juice and not wine. Otherwise, we wouldn't have the individual cups.
They just do it automatically when it's my Sunday to have communion, which is 6 times
Right,
out of the year.
right, right.
It's done. I don't have to remind them.
Well, and like today, they're fine, but this afternoon, they won't be. And my feet do the same thing, by the way. Anything else? Any other questions? This is the time you can just ask anything you want, because I'll tell you, I don't know. Or I'll lie to you. One of the two, and you just get to figure out which one it is.
What was there before the Big Bang Theory?
That's a new show on TV that I haven't, Gunsmoke.
There was God.
Gunsmoke.
Against no,
Yeah, I have a hard time with that too.
yeah.
In the beginning, there was nothing, which
Yeah.
exploded.
Who is or what is God, or what started all this?
We don't know. I wasn't there.
If there were, I
I'm old,
know.
and I'm not that old.
If there was a God, or there is a God, what, he was out there in this blackness all by himself.
Nothingness.
Nothingness.
And
yeah.
void.
Yeah,
That's what it says.
This is what it says.
yeah,
There was nothingness, and only God can create out of nothingness.
yeah.
Something out of nothing.
And he whispered the world into being.
Yeah.
Doesn't have to be a big bang. You can whisper the world into being.
More dramatic when it's a big bang, though.
Yeah, maybe. You ever try to get people to pay attention to you? The louder you get, the louder they get.
Yeah,
But if you drop your voice and whisper, they all of a sudden get very
Yeah.
quiet. They do, especially children. If you're a teacher, you have to train yourself to do that. Instead of trying to get louder than them, you just drop your voice and get quiet.
Do the same thing with music.
Yeah.
You know, prelude if you want people to
Hit
be
two loud
quiet.
notes and then very soft. It's amazing how quiet
Yeah,
the
they,
church gets.
We have this wonderful organ that she occasionally rings the rafters with it, but mostly it's not that loud.
or it could be, if you're in the pulpit and you draw a blank, it gets real quiet in the church too.
No. You know what happens at my church? They fill in the blanks for me.
Okay.
That's when you know you've been there too long. And when somebody's in the hospital in either Philadelphia or Pittsburgh, I go, it's one of the P cities. I don't know which one, but one of them. And they usually can tell me which one.
Which one you're supposed to go to.
Which P city are they in? You watching the clock for me?
I'm trying to.
they never care about being out early.
Pardon me?
I said, they don't ever worry about getting out early.
Oh,
It's getting out late.
yeah, my people don't, I don't think they notice one way or the other. They trust me by now, they trust me to, if I run over a few minutes, it's because it's important.
Yeah.
And they know I have it timed, that they trust me not to keep them there longer than is necessary.
They know if I let them out early this week, I'll be keeping them late next week.
Well, there's that too. But I also don't preach more than about 10 to 12 minutes,
10 minutes.
maybe 8, if I'm lucky. If I've done a really good job of writing it, 8.
Brings a lot of peace to my heart. I've had several complaints lately about my sermons not being long enough. And I'm sitting there, you really want me to sit here and preach? Oh, I did not know that was a problem. I thought people wanted to get out of here. All right.
Well, I figure I don't have to tell them everything I know the first week, you know? I need to save something for the next week. So
Well, I
just tell
figure-
them you're saving it for next
I
week.
figure if I get invited back, if you're short the first time, they might think you know something, or they want to find out what you know. And that's what you told us when we were going through, that you don't have to give them everything the first Sunday.
You don't,
And
no. This is a marathon, not a sprint.
the other thing I noticed then is if you get done with the sermon, you get done with that part of it, and then you go into the, most of them have the pastoral prayer and all that after. You get more things to ask in prayer from the church, because they've all looked at their watch and said, we got 25 minutes yet.
Sometimes we are late because the prayer requests just
You,
keep coming.
your church has a longer list than some, but that's not a bad thing.
No, and when I first came there, they wouldn't even talk to each other.
Now you have trouble with each other.
Well, there is that.
I have that. No, some churches are that way, and some have the prayer list, and I always ask, do you ask? And everybody says, yes, we do. And some churches will just sit there and look at you, and you're thinking, okay, anybody? But then the next one, you can't get them to shut up.
Yeah.
And that's
We
fine,
have a
too.
prayer list, but we add names, because that's the time when the family is gathered. That's the only time the family is gathered.
That's right.
The entire family is gathered.
And there's a couple of churches I've asked, and then somebody told me after, we don't usually ask. Well, I say,
Too bad. So
that's how I do
sad.
it, yeah.
Too bad, so sad.
There's one couple in my church that they've been coming for 3 or 4 years now. And I've known the family for 49 years when I moved to Clearfield County. And there was trouble between the brothers. The one brother died. And it was in the bulletin, and I mentioned it out loud. And the brother who comes has been very withdrawn since then. I hope that goes away.
It will go away as soon as he's comfortable with it. But I know this is going to sound harsh, and I don't mean it to be. That is his problem and not yours.
True. And I know.
And all you can do is make yourself available to him.
Yeah. I know what house they lived in that town. I
That's
know
all right.
all of that good stuff.
All right. Anything else? This side has been quiet today.
They didn't get a chance, maybe.
Not earlier.
Not earlier. You're right. Not earlier. Is there anything that I have taught you that has been useful?
That's it.
Good. Good. I'd like for it to be useful. Are there other prayer concerns that you'd like to list besides the one we got here? Let's pray. Most gracious Lord, you are the teacher, the rabbi, and we are your students. Help us to learn from you that we might teach others. Help us to use all that we learn in our hearts and minds and spirits to raise up you as the good shepherd and the one who heals all that is broken. We lift up to you those who were survivors of our recent carnage, for those whose families have been affected, for those who are having difficulty. Our scripture tomorrow says, "Fear not, little flock." Help us to take that to heart. We lift up to you the Stensons, Ken's mother-in-law, and the Reverend Ed Carlson. We lift up to you also those who are alone and lonely, those who are outcast and downtrodden, those who are hungry and thirsty, those who are homeless and without love. Help us to be your hands and feet, your heart and arms, that the world might know that we love them and that you love them. Give us safety as we go home and as we become your church, scattered, but alive, well, and at work in the world. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you all.
Thank you for coming.
Good Lord willing, we all